Quranic Laws, Qurani Qawaneen. By G.A. Parwez. Translated by Dr. Abdul Wadud. Rumors. 2. Don't spread rumors. Whenever you hear something which concerns your collective life, communicate it to the appropriate authorities so as to make them reach a correct conclusion after proper investigation.
وإذا جاءهم أمر من الأمن أو الخوف أذاعوا به ولو ردوه إلى الرسول وإلى أولي الأمر منهم لعلمه الذين يستنبطونه منهم.
483. When there comes to them some matter touching public safety or fear, they divulge it, although their attachment and obedience to the divine system requires that they had only referred it to the Rasul, central authority, or those charged with authority amongst them, officers of the lower ranks. In case they refer it to them, the specialists could verify and ascertain the truth. At yet another place it is said,
يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين.
49:6. O you who believe! If a mischief maker comes to you with any news, ascertain the truth, lest you should harm people unknowingly, and afterwards have to feel ashamed for what you have done. 2. When you hear a rumor against somebody, your first reaction ought to be that it is a calumny. In Surah An-Nur, 24th chapter of the Quran, an event has been mentioned concerning a noble, chaste lady, about whom somebody started a rumor which got spread in the society.
لولا إذ سمعتموه ظن المؤمنون والمؤمنات بأنفسهم خيرا وقالوا هذا إفك مبين.
24:12. When you heard it, why did you not react with a favorable view and declare it as a clear calumny? Why did not believers, men and women, when they heard of the affair, thought good of your own fold and said it is a manifest calumny? It was further said,
إذ تلقونه بلسنتكم وتقولون بأفواهكم ما ليس لكم به علم وتحسبونه هينا وهو عند الله عظيم ولولا إذ سمعتموه قلتم ما يكون لنا أن نتكلم بهذا سبحانك هذا بهتان عظيم.
24:15-16. When you received it on your tongues and spoke with your mouths that of which you had no knowledge, and you deemed it a trifle, while with Allah it was serious. And why did you not, when you heard it, say it beseems us not to talk of it? Glory be to thee. This is a great calumny. Miscellaneous. A. Persecution. B. Unlawful persecution is a crime.
والذين يؤذون المؤمنين والمؤمنات بغير ما اكتسبوا فقد احتملوا بهتانا وإثما مبينا.
33:58. Those who molest believing men and women undeservedly bear, on themselves, a calumny and a glaring sin. At yet another place it is said,
الذين فتنوا المؤمنين والمؤمنات ثم لم يتوبوا فلهم عذاب جهنم ولهم عذاب الحريق.
85:10. Those who persecute, or draw into temptation, the believing men and women and retract not from their practice, will have a burning chastisement of hell, the chastisement that will burn everything they possess to ashes. It is apparent that persecution includes both physical as well as mental molestation. The mental vexation is even more worse than the physical torture. B. Tyranny and excess. A comprehensive list of all that can be called tyranny or oppression cannot be prepared. As a matter of principle, it may be said that anything against the divine law comes under oppression. In fact, this word means to put a thing at a place where it does not belong. This makes the purport of this word much wider. It is the duty of an Islamic state to provide protection for the oppressed and take upon itself the responsibility of the redress of their grievances. It is said in Surah Bani Israel, 17th chapter of the Quran,
ومن قتل مظلوما فقد جعلنا لوليه سلطانا.
17:33. If anyone is slain wrongfully, the murderer should not think that there is nobody to stand by the heirs of the one murdered and therefore he shall not be called to account for the crime. To provide protection for the heirs, we have made the Islamic rule authoritative and prevailing. This rule itself shall provide protection to the heirs of the slain person. Although this verse is related to murder, it shall be applicable to all sort of oppressions. If the government itself is the oppressor, the redress of grievances should be arranged through the judiciary. Justice ought to be provided cost for free because providing redress of grievances is a duty of the state and as such the state cannot ask for remuneration from the oppressed in providing him the redress of his grievances. C. Conspiracy and secret counseling. Secret counsels for unlawful matters and conspiracies are a crime.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تناجيتم فلا تتناجوا بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول وتناجوا بالبر والتقوى واتقوا الله الذي إليه تحشرون.
58:9 O you who believe! When you hold councils, do it not for criminal activities against the divine order, but always do it to achieve ends in conformity to the divine law. In short, in whatever you do, your aim should be obedience of the divine law, because the divine system should always remain the focus of all your activities. D. The mutual, reciprocal, relations of individuals in the society. Believers are a single brotherhood.
إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون.
49:10 The believers are but a single brotherhood, so reconcile between your two contending brothers. While doing so, do not forget that both of them are your brethren and your decision should be according to the divine laws, without any favor or bias. This shall enable your society to become worthy of Allah's favors. If at any time, conflict between any two factions of the Mu'mineen reaches a stage of actual fighting, even then make peace amongst them, and if one commits excesses, call him to account.
وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فاءت فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين.
49:9 If, unfortunately, at any time, two parties among the believers start fighting each other, intervene to bring them to make peace, but if one of them transgresses bounds against the other, then you should all fight against the one who transgresses, until it reverts to abiding by the decision made in accordance with the divine law. So if he complies, then make peace between them with justice and be fair, for Allah loveth those who are fair and just. Pertaining to economy. 1. The basic duty of an Islamic state, as ordained in the Holy Quran, is provision of zakat. Thus it is said,
الذين إن مكناهم في الأرض أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة.
22:41 Those Mu'mineen are the people who, if we grant them rule in the land, establish the way of life consistent with the divine laws and provide zakat, means to provide zakat. Thus the providing of zakat is the duty of an Islamic state. Zakat means the providing of the means of nourishment. As such, it becomes incumbent upon the Islamic State to provide means of nourishment to the individuals, which includes both nourishment of the body as well as of the human potentialities. Thus it becomes the duty of an Islamic State to make such arrangements that the fulfillment of the basic necessities of life of each individual shall keep going, and also that their potentialities may develop. This is called Rabubiyyat, providing of sustenance. The Rabubiyyat of the entire universe is an attribute of Allah. The words
الحمد لله رب العالمين
1:1 make the beginning of the Quranic text. But the practical application of this attribute of Allah, in the human world, takes its practical manifestation through the agency of an Islamic state. Thus all the responsibilities, in this respect, which Allah has taken upon himself, are fulfilled by the Islamic state. 2. Based on this principle, it becomes the responsibility of an Islamic state that no living object, human beings, may also include animals, Lughatul Quran root Rebebe, in its domain, remains devoid of nourishment.
وما من دبة في الأرض إلا على الله رزقها.
11:6 is Allah's commandment, which means that there is no moving creature on earth, but its sustenance is the responsibility of Allah. In this respect the state becomes responsible to its individuals and their progeny for the fulfillment of their daily necessities of life, and tells them,
نحن نرزقهم وإياكم.
17:31 We are responsible for your sustenance and that of your offsprings. 3. The Islamic social order takes shape by means of a contract between the state and the individuals living in its domain. In this contract, the life and property of the believers are placed at the disposal of the state, and in lieu of it, becomes the responsibility of the state to provide a life of peace and plenty, life of Jannat, to the individuals.
إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة.
9:111 The Mu'mineen, those who profess iman belief in Allah, and the divine order enter into a treaty. The Mu'mineen place their persons and their wealth at the disposal of the divine order, sell them, and the divine order guarantees a life of peace and plenty, life of paradise, for them in return. In this life of paradise are included all the basic necessities of life, food, clothing, shelter, etc. The Quran has introduced to us the paradisiacal life as follows.
إن لك ألا تجوع فيها ولا تعر وأنك لا تظمأ فيها ولا تضحى.
2118 to 119, there is therein enough provision for you not to go hungry, nor to go naked, nor to suffer from thirst from the sun's heat. Everything mentioned above is available without any undue labor. 4. In this society every individual retains for himself the proceeds of his labor according to his needs and gives over the rest of it for fulfilling the needs of others.
ويسألونك ماذا ينفقون قل العفو.
2219, O Rasul. They ask you as to how much, of their earnings, should they keep open for fulfilling the needs of the others. Tell them whatever is over and above their genuine needs. 1671. This system shall be established through the agency of the state, because the Rasul has been ordained.
خذ العفو.
7199, Get the surplus from them. This is the natural result of the above said treaty covenant. Therefore the question of taking by force does not arise. Those who earn less than their needs, or those who are not capable of putting in labor, do not take it by way of charity but they claim it as a matter of their right, from the collected surplus.
وفي أموالهم حق للسائل والمحروم.
5119, In their wealth and possessions is the recognized right of the needy and the disabled. 5. According to the economic system of the Quran, wealth cannot be accumulated. A severe warning has been given against accumulating wealth.
والذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم يوم يحمى عليها في نار جهنم فتكوى بها جباههم وجنوبهم وظهورهم هذا ما كنزتم لأنفسكم فذوقوا ما كنتم تكنزون.
934 to 35, O Rasul. These priests and monks, and their followers who, in the guise of their self-made shariat, consider the system of capitalism as the will of Allah, and thus hoard heaps of gold and silver and do not make them available to the usage of humanity, announce unto them a grievous penalty. During the period of divine system, these will be heated in the fire of Jahannam, hell, heat will be produced out of that wealth and with it their foreheads will be branded, their flanks and their backs in this fire shall mount to their hearts. 104 6-7, they shall be told, this is the treasure you had hoarded for yourself, so now taste, the treasure you had buried. Wealthy cannot be allowed to circulate wealth amongst themselves alone.
كي لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم. 59 6.
To meet emergent needs, it is necessary for the people that whatever they have retained for their own requirements, they shall also donate something out of it. This is known as sadaqat. This will also not be an individual affair, it shall be carried out under the system of the state. Thus the Rasul was ordained.
خذ من أموالهم صدقة تطهرهم وتزكيهم بها وصل عليهم إن صلاتك سكن لهم والله سميع عليم.
9103, Take their donations, out of their earnings, and in association with other members, make arrangements for their education which would purify them, by removing all doubts from their minds, and nourish them. As they grow in their qualities, you should applaud them because your applause will certainly bring them peace of mind. Allah is all-hearing and all-knowing. In some cases the avenues of usage of such emergency needs have been prescribed by the Quran itself, when it is said,
إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم.
960, About sadaqat, that is wealth which the state spends for public welfare, it ought to be understood that its distribution shall not mean personal benefit or satisfaction of the individual emotions, but it is the right of those who depend on others for their nourishment, that is those who, for some reason, are not able to earn themselves. B. Whose business somehow or other comes to a standstill. C. For the remuneration of those who are entrusted with the duty of collecting sadaqat, the source of state revenue. D. Whose consolation of hearts is required. It means that those people who are prepared to join the divine system but some impediments do not allow them to take this course, they should be helped in the removal of these impediments. E. To get freedom for those fastened to the chains of others' captivity, subjugation. F. To help those who are under the enemy's debt or penalty, and cannot manage to pay it off on their own. G. Also the wayfarers who are in need of money. H. In addition to the above, anything conducive and helpful to the general welfare of humanity by the divine system. Described above are the codes laid down by Allah based on knowledge and wisdom. In this verse the item of in the divine cause is very comprehensive. It includes all other avenues of usage, which the Islamic State deems necessary. Note amongst us the above items are known as items of zakat expenditure. This is not correct. The Quran has clearly described them as item of sadaqat and not of zakat. Even the prevalent concept of zakat itself is different from the Quranic concept. 7. Earth, land, is the basic source of production. Because an Islamic state has the momentous responsibility of provision of zakat to fulfill, therefore this basic source of production, the land, cannot remain in the ownership of individuals. Land remains under the charge of the state, so that the needs of the individuals may get equally fulfilled. In Surah Hamim Sajda, 41st chapter of the Quran, it is said,
وجعل فيها رواسي من فوقها وبارك فيها وقدر فيها أقواتها في 4 أيام سواء للسائلين.
41:10, He set on the earth mountains standing firm, standing high above its surface, which serve as means of water supply, and gave it the capability to produce different items, and with the change of 4 seasons standardized ** its produce correctly, for feeding its inhabitants. 39:67, and 56:73-74. Note it has been clarified at several places in the Quran, that the earth has been created to fulfill the requirements of humanity. As an all-encompassing explanation of this topic is not intended in this book, therefore it is not considered quoting all the relevant references, however, see verses 55:10, 56:63-73. 8. In the economic system of Islam, except those who are disabled, only that person has the right to receive who puts in labor.
وأن ليس للإنسان إلا ما سعى.
53:39, that a man can have nothing, but what he strives for, is its basic principle. As described earlier under the heading usury, any profit on the capital is totally unlawful and amounts to declaration of war against Allah and the divine system of His Rasul. As a matter of fact, the question of profit on capital does not arise when nothing surplus to the needs is left with anybody. 9. As said earlier in item 4, above, in the Islamic order surplus wealth is not left with any person. Thus the question of raising personal property does not arise, which includes land, wealth, industry, trade, etc. Everything remains in the custody of the state, so that the needs of every individual get fulfilled and their standard of living goes on rising, and then eventually this system, surpassing its boundaries, extends to embrace humanity at large. 10. It shall be the duty of an Islamic state to establish such an economic system in the light of this basic guidance of the Holy Quran which can satisfy all the requisites of Rabbubiyat, so that nourishment is neither held back from anybody, nor his dignity is injured. This system shall gradually come into force. The Quranic injunctions relating to charity, inheritance, etc. are of transitory nature for the period in which this system is still taking shape and is not yet finalized. This also ought to be kept in mind that this system shall be established by those who consider it a part of their belief and yearning of their hearts. This is the motive force for its establishment and stability. In the absence of such a driving force, a system of this kind can neither get established, nor can it survive. It happens doubtful to assume that an Islamic state can take up the responsibility of providing nourishment to moving creatures, such as dogs and reptiles in its domain. Abdul Wadud. To interpret the word as arba ayam, change of 4 seasons, is not comprehensive. Following is the full explanation. The terms arba ayam and yumin are specific Quranic terms. They represent the 6 eras of evolution in the creation of heavens and the earth. 2 eras, yumain in Arabic translation. So he completed them as several heavens in 2 eras, 41:12. Thus, yumain, 2 eras includes the evolutionary period involved in the creation of the heavens and the earth. On earth the period without life lasted for 3,000 million years and science calls it the Azoic period. 4 eras, arba'iyam. He made on the earth mountains standing high above it and bestowed blessings on it and measured therein all things to give them nourishment in due proportion in 4 eras, 41:10. In these 4 eras, life began on earth and gradually got evolved, and this has lasted for 2,000 million years. Precambrian eras 1,500 million years. B. Paleozoic era or ancient life 300 million years. C. Mesozoic era or middle life 130 million years. D. Kinozoic or modern life started 75 million years ago. Basic human rights. These are the rights which every human being, on account of his belonging to the human race, is entitled to without any discrimination of sex, color, race, religion, abode, land, and nationality. An Islamic state guarantees these rights to every individual living in its territory. And if the state fails to provide such a surety, the individuals can acquire those rights through the court of law. The prominent rights are as follows. 1. Every human child is equally worthy of respect, thus on account of one's genesis there can be no discrimination, there is no difference between one man and the other, 1770.
ولقد كرمنا بني آدم.
We have honored the humanity as a whole has been ordained by Allah. 2. In the Islamic social order, criterion of determining status of its people shall be their personal deeds and merit, 46:19.
ولكل درجات مما عملوا.
And to all are assigned degrees according to their deeds. 3. No human being can be subservient to another. Nobody can have the right to rule other people, 378.
ما كان لبشر أن يؤتيه الله الكتاب والحكم والنبوة ثم يقول للناس كونوا عبادا لي من دون الله.
No human has the right, even though Allah may have given him a code of laws or the power to enforce it or even Nabuwah, that he should say unto mankind, be subservient to me instead of Allah. Subservience can only be to the divine injunctions. Its details have already been given under the heading State Affairs. It is apparent that when nobody can be subservient to another, how can he be a slave to others? The Quran closed the door of slavery for good. 4. None shall seize the labor of another person by force, every worker shall get the full recompense of his labor, 39:70.
ووفيت كل نفس ما عملت.
To every person shall be paid in full, the fruits, of his deeds. Recompense does not mean wages. The concept of wages is a product of the capitalist system, the Quran has cut at its very roots. Compensation means the fulfillment of needs. Anything surplus to one's needs, shall be willingly handed over to others, with complete promptness of his heart. Take for example a peasant who puts in labor for one full year and produces 100 mons of wheat. That wheat certainly belongs to him, none can seize it forcibly, but on the basis of his iman, conviction, he shall give to others all that is surplus to his needs. This shall happen in the social order of the mu'mineen, the believers. See details under the heading Economics. 5. Everyone shall be treated justly, 1690.
إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان.
Indeed Allah commands justice and benevolence. Details of what is meant by justice have been given under the heading Justice. So much so that justice shall be meted out even to the enemy, 5:8.
ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى.
Let not the enmity of others to you make you deviate from the path of justice. Always do justice, with friends as well as foes. This shall bring you nearer to that mode of life, which Allah desires, for you. 6. Not only justice, if someone lags behind in spite of his best efforts, his deficiency has to be made good by others to restore the disturbed balance in society. That is called ihsan. That is why it is said, 70:24-25.
والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم.
Those who are indigents or are incapacitated, have a recognized right in the wealth of society. 7. The right of sustenance. To provide means of sustenance to every individual is the responsibility of the system raised on divine injunctions, 6:152. Such system shall proclaim,
نحن نرزقكم وإياهم.
We are responsible for your needs as well as the needs of your offsprings. 8. Security and safety of life. Details already described in the chapter on protection of life. See 6:152. 9. Protection of wealth. Everything that a person has gained and has been lawfully acknowledged as his property, shall be protected. Details already given in the chapter on protection of property. See 429. 10. Protection of dwellings. To expel people from their places of residence has been declared a crime, 285. 11. Protection of chastity. Details have been given in the chapter on zina, adultery. 12. Protection of aesthetics. It means the right to satisfy one's taste for the beauties of this life remaining within the limits of the law. The Holy Quran lays down in a challenging manner, 732.
قل من حرم زينة الله التي أخرج لعباده والطيبات من الرزق.
Say to them, O Rasul, who dares forbidding the adornments and elegance of life, beautiful gifts of Allah, which He has produced for His obedient people, the humans, and the agreeable and wholesome things, which He has provided, for their sustenance, see also 726 and 1831. The Holy Quran has presented life of paradise as the ideal life. This also includes the beautiful gifts of life. The details are as under, 76:12-16.
وجزاهم بما صبروا جنة وحريرا متكئين فيها على الأرائك لا يرون فيها شمسا ولا زمهريرا ودانية عليهم ظلالها وذللت قطوفها تذليلا ويطاف عليهم بآنية من فضة وأكواب كانت قوارير من فضة قدروها تقديرا.
This life of paradise is the result of their perseverance and constancy. Therein they lead a life of tranquility and authority, in gardens ever succulent, atmosphere of ardor and emancipation. They shall be reclining therein on raised thrones, of authority and discretion. They will find therein neither the sun's excessive heat, nor excessive cold of the winter, or an everlasting spring, thick shady trees stooping over them with fruit-laden branches. No means of sustenance or comfort shall be beyond their reach. They shall get them without soul-exhausting efforts. Food will be served to them in utensils of silver and drinks in beakers, as of glass that is bright as glass but made of silver. Those utensils would have been made according to the most proportionate measures. Let it be clearly understood that in an Islamic order, the above-mentioned things shall be available to all, and not to any one particular rank or class. In the life of paradise there shall be no separate ranks of the rich and the poor. 13. Right of the freedom of religion. There is the freedom to adopt or forsake whatever religion one likes. 256.
لا إكراه في الدين.
There is no compulsion in following the way of life based on the Quranic fundamentals. Details already given, under the heading State Affairs, subheading Position of non-Muslims in an Islamic State and the protection of their places of worship. In Surah Hajj, 22nd chapter of the Quran, it is said, 2240.
لولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لهدمت صوامع وبيع وصلوات ومساجد يذكر فيها اسم الله كثيرا.
Had Allah not restrained one set of people through another, and given a free hand to the transgressors to do what they willed, there would surely have been pulled down monasteries, churches, synagogues and mosques in which the name of Allah is remembered much. Be it clear that according to the Holy Quran there is no punishment for murtad, that is one who abandons Islam for any other religion and apostate. When freedom of religion is the basic principle, then why should there be a punishment for change of religion? 14. Right of redress of grievances to the oppressed.
لا يحب الله الجهر بالسوء من القول إلا من ظلم.
For 148, Allah loves not public exposure of the evil, except by a person who has been wronged. 15. The right of a person not to bear the burden of another.
ولا تكسب كل نفس إلا عليها ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى.
6164. Every soul draws the meat of his own acts on none but himself, and no bearer of burden can bear the burden of another. This is the basic principle. In addition to it there are certain rights which do not come under laws. These were described under different headings. These rights mean that any law which deprives people of these rights shall be repugnant to the Quran, also that if any society does not fulfill these rights, it can be sued in the court of law. Details in my collection of articles in the book titled, Now, Bahari Now. The relationship between crime and punishment. The details of the Quranic code of laws have all been stated, but often it is being asked, what is the relationship between crime and punishment, and what is the Quranic philosophy of punishment? In reply to this question I had published a short treatise in the monthly Tului Islam. I deem it proper to include in this book the relevant parts of that article, so that this topic may become complete from this angle of vision as well. Crime and punishment. 1. In the Holy Quran one finds two kinds of injunctions, moral, and, the second, punitive. Punitive means those laws, the violation of which becomes a social crime, and moral means those laws which cannot be categorized as a social crime. For example, 1737.
ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا.
Do not walk arrogantly on the earth. The Quran ordains that non-observance of this injunction is not a social crime. On the other hand, there is injunction in which it is said, 1732.
ولا تقربوا الزنا.
Do not go near adultery or fornication. It is apparent that the non-observance of this injunction is a social crime. However, the above said division is arbitrary only to understand the question under view. Otherwise, the basis of every Quranic injunctions aims at correction and importance of the morals, and morals encompasses all the means of nurture of human personality. 2. The punitive injunctions are also of two kinds. I. Those in which the punishment has also been prescribed by the Quran, and 2. Those, the punishment of which is left to the Islamic government to determine as per exigencies of particular circumstances. For example, in the case of intoxicants, wine, its prohibition is ordained, but the punishment has not been prescribed for its non-observance. It is an issue which warrants deep pondering that out of those injunctions for which the punishment has not been prescribed by the Quran, which ones can be included in the list of punitive laws? It is apparent that no single person can answer this question, nor it is the right of any single person to declare a person liable to punishment on the basis of the non-observance of a Quranic injunction. Its decision rests with the Islamic State. This also must be kept in mind, that such decisions made by the Islamic State shall be liable to change as and when needed, based on the exigencies of the changing circumstances. This is not applicable to injunctions alone. Even those issues described by the Quran as principles are in the matter of limitation, hudud, laid down by the Quran. It is only the Islamic State that can declare unlawful their violation in various forms. I have not used the word limitations in the sense of punishment, rather, I mean by it the sphere of freedom to act, the trespassing of which is disallowed. The limits and the principles are the two facets of one reality. 3. It is the duty of an Islamic order to create such an atmosphere within the society, in which an individual considers each of his basic rights and each of his means of living perfectly safe in such a manner that he may not have the least anxiety or fear about it. Creation of such an atmosphere is the necessary result of the Quranic social order. The Quran says that in this order the state of the individual shall be such that, 238.
فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون.
On them there shall be no external fear, nor shall they have any internal grief. Such an atmosphere comes into existence by educating the people and freeing them from the worries of meeting the basic necessities of life, according to the permanent values of the Quran. But in spite of all this, there can exist such people in society as are psychologically unsound, and their insanity can take away the sense of comfort and satisfaction from the society. Such a sick person has to be treated, and unless he does not recover completely from this condition, it is necessary to protect the society from the dangers created by his insanity. A majority of them can be treated by improvement in their psychological correction, but in some cases fear of punishment has to be resorted to as a final measure. There are many psychological patients who can be treated by putting in them the sense of fear. This type of treatment is called punishment. Its objective on the one hand is the correction of the criminal, and on the other, the rectification of those in whose subconscious mind the germs of crime are festering. The concept of punishment for revenge is un-Quranic. The above described is one objective of punishment. The other objective is the compensation for the loss suffered by the person inflicted on by the criminal. For example, a person has committed theft in somebody's house, and the court has punished him with 10 years imprisonment. This shall not compensate the loss suffered by the victim. Justice demands that the loss be returned to the owner. If recovery could not take place, let the social system itself compensate the loss in kind or by paying its cost. According to the Quranic concept of crime and punishment, the plaintiff is not in fact the complainant against the criminal, he is rather a complainant against the government or social system. It is the social order that had contracted to protect his property, and if somebody has laid his hands on his property, it shall mean non-fulfillment of the contract on the part of the social system, and as such the offender is the social system and not that particular person who had committed theft. It is up to the social system to decide whether it compensates the loss by itself or gets it done by the offender. It is not the concern of the plaintiff. It is the duty of the social system to stand by the victim or his heirs and to become the protector of the plaintiff and his heirs. 1733.
فقد جعلنا لوليه سلطانا فلا يسرف في القتل إنه كان منصورا.
If the social order does not compensate the loss of the offender, how can it become his protector and how can it claim to be his helper? It is true that every loss cannot be compensated by the payment of money, yet the social order has got to provide compensation in any possible way, except when the loss is the result of one's own negligence or carelessness. In addition to providing compensation, it shall be the duty of the social system to make arrangements that such things do not happen again. 4. It has been stated above that the object of penal punishments is the treatment of the psychologically sick people. But the foremost condition for the success of the psychological treatment is that the patient develops a realization that he has done a wrong. The Quran explains that if he does develop a feeling of reproach, you can expect that he shall mend his ways. In such an event the Quran forgives him instead of inflicting punishment, and the authorities shall keep a watch that he corrects himself and shall help him in his self-rectification. This is the reason that the Quran has made provision for forgiveness, and thus correction, before the punishment. It proposes punishment only when no possibility of correction is left in the criminal except through punishment. 5. The Holy Quran proposes corporal punishments. It does not send the thief to prison, in which case the offender himself goes on getting his food and clothing, but his wife and children die of hunger, that is, members of his household suffer instead of him. As a matter of fact, the fear, which can cause the habitual offenders to mend their ways, or which can keep the potential offenders away from committing crime, can only be aroused by corporal punishments. 6. Now look at the principle which, according to the Quran, are basic in this respect. Qisas, it does not mean to inflict punishment on the offender, rather it means to pursue the criminal in such a way that he does not remain unpunished. It means that in the Quranic system, no crime shall remain untracked. The Quran calls a flawless and firm system of investigation, a means of providing security and safety of the social living.
ولكم في القصاص حياة يا أولي الألباب. 279.
B. Justice. It means that while deciding a case, the status of the criminal should not affect the demand of justice in any way. 178.
الحر بالحر والعبد بالعبد.
Free for the free and slave for the slave shall remain its principle. C. The punishment for a crime should be proportionate to the nature of the crime, not more. 42-40.
وجزاء سيئة سيئة مثلها.
And that too, in case where there is no chance of the offender's correction. D. Until a crime has been established, the accused should be taken as innocent and the society ought to have a favorable opinion about him. An incident in Surah An-Nur, 24th chapter of the Quran, sums it up as follows. Some people in Medina brought an allegation against a chaste woman which the people spread it further. On this, the Quran instructed that after hearing this scandal your first reaction ought to have been that. 24:12-16.
لولا إذ سمعتموه ظن المؤمنون والمؤمنات بأنفسهم خيرا وقالوا هذا إفك مبين. ولولا إذ سمعتموه قلتم ما يكون لنا أن نتكلم بهذا سبحانك هذا بهتان عظيم.
It is a fabrication, an open and grievous calumny. It provides a permanent guidance, not to have an adverse opinion about the accused. E. If a crime has been committed prior to promulgation of a law declaring it as such, it should not be considered a crime. In other words, the application of a law cannot be made retrospectively, this shall be applicable only after its enforcement. Regarding many such injunctions the Quran has said, 422.
إلا ما قد سلف.
Except what has foregone. That is, what happened before the enforcement of law, shall not be accountable. F. An act not committed willfully shall not be considered cognizable. It is said in Surah Azab, 33rd chapter of the Quran, 33:5.
وليس عليكم جناح فيما أخطأتم به ولكن ما تعمدت قلوبكم.
There is no blame on you if you make a mistake therein, what counts, is the intention of your hearts. But carelessness, inattention, is also a crime in itself and punishable, that is why the Quran has also prescribed punishment in case of murder by mistake, although it is not as severe as for premeditated murder, rather it is by way of atonement. G. Some small mistakes on the part of people who always avoid big crimes are pardonable. In Surah An-Najm, 53rd chapter of the Quran, it is said,
الذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش إلا اللمم.
53:32, for those who avoid major sins and shameful deeds, falling into small errors, is pardonable. H. While prescribing punishment, the offender's intellectual level, education and upbringing, and social environments must be kept in mind. It is on this account that the Quran had ordained punishment for fornication with women, of that period, half that of the free-believing women, for 25, because in view of the circumstances under which they were brought up, high morals could not be expected from them. On the contrary, the wives of the Rasul were told that if any one of them commits a crime, their punishment should be twice that of an ordinary believing woman. 33:30. I. The kind of social order that the Quran establishes, and the way in which its individuals are brought up, it expects of them to come forward voluntarily and accept their slips if ever they occur, and to tell the truth, even if it goes against themselves, for 135. In this verse, the Holy Quran has presented such a lofty principle regarding evidence, in the presence of which there remains no difficulty in the administration of justice. See chapter on testimony. 7. The Holy Quran aims at correction of the criminal, therefore it adopts all possible means to stir up in his mind the sense of contempt for crime, and in this connection presents an extraordinary, and strange, principle. It says, for 111.
ومن يكسب إثما فإنما يكسبه على نفسه.
And if anyone commits an excess or an oppression, he does so against his own self. That is, if anyone commits crime or excess against anybody, he thinks in his own mind that he has harmed somebody else, but in reality he commits the crime against his own person and thus harms his own self. Here it is said that it is the criminal's own personality that is affected and that it cannot be made good by an external punishment. It also means that if the criminal, somehow or the other, escapes punishment, even then he cannot escape the harm which he has inflicted on his own personality, because Allah's law of requital is such that, 40:19.
يعلم خائنة الأعين وما تخفي الصدور.
He knows the dishonesty of the eyes and that which the bosoms hide. Such are the teachings which make a criminal feel guilty and by so doing provide a means for self-rectification. Yet another question arises here, and it is, that after a criminal gets punishment by a court of law, does he escape accountability in the life hereafter? For this we ought to comprehend what is meant by accountability in the hereafter. The effect of every human action, even an idea, is engraved on his self, and his life hereafter takes shape on the basis of these accumulated effects. One effect of crime falls on the society and the other on his own self. Punishment by the court of law can annul the crime against the society, but it cannot obliterate the effect of the crime on his own personality. He himself shall have to make it good. For it, the first step is the feeling of guilt which results into tawbah or his determination to keep away from the crime. The second step is that of correction, which means to perform such constructive deeds which can compensate the loss which resulted from the crime he had committed. 11:114.
إن الحسنات يذهبن السيئات.
Those deeds that are good, remove the effects of those that are evil. This is the basic principle of the Quranic law of requital. As a matter of fact, one who firmly believes in Allah's law of requital seldom commits a crime.